So number 21 on the review is asking us to find the domains for each of these specific functions. And then it also wants us to write the domains using inequality or interval notation. So for the first one, we have a square root. So the only thing you have to remember when we're taking the domain of a square root is that everything underneath the square root, whatever it happens to be, that stuff needs to be greater than or equal to 0 because we cannot take the square root of a negative number. So therefore, I'm just going to say 2x plus 7 is greater than or equal to 0. Move the 7 over. You get 2x is greater than or equal to negative 7 divided by 2. X is greater than or equal to negative 7 halves. So that right there could be your inequality notation. If you want your interval notation, it would be a bracket. And you'd say negative 7 halves all the way to positive infinity with a parenthesis sign on the right-hand side. So that's your first one. Okay, part B says g of x is 7 over x plus 2. I think if you remember for a domain, when you're dealing with a rational function, which is what this is that the bottom piece, the denominator, can never equal 0. So whatever it is on the bottom, you set that equal to 0 and you solve. So we're just going to say x plus 2 is equal to 0. Solve and you get x is equal to negative 2. So therefore your domain would be x's cannot equal negative 2. So that's your inequality notation. If you're going to use interval notation, which I would not recommend doing in this case, you would just have negative infinity to negative 2, and then union negative 2 to infinity. Sorry, it looks so bad over there. But I would just write it as inequality notation by using this guy right here. Okay, the last and probably most interesting one on this problem set is the third one. What do you do when you have both a rational function and a square root? So notice that in the bottom here, this denominator is both first a denominator, so it can't be 0, and second, it's a square root, so it has to be greater than or equal to 0. So we have to consider sort of two cases when thinking about it. So the first case is, like case number 1, is the square root of x plus 10 has to strictly be greater than or equal to 0 because it is a square root. But at the same time, the square root of x plus 10 is not allowed to be a 0 because it's in the denominator. So what we're going to do is just take my x plus 10 and set it greater than or equal to 0. So I'm going to start with case number 1 there. So I'm going to get that x's have to be greater than or equal to negative 10. But negative 10 actually makes this thing 0. So therefore, I actually have to remove the equal to sign. So the only answer that will work for us is x's need to be strictly greater than negative 10. Now that's your inequality notation. Your interval notation would look like this. Negative 10 to positive infinity, and we would use parentheses on either side of that because we're taking away the equal to because it's in the denominator and can never be a 0. All right, that's how you do this problem.